And we're back.
We are back.
Conversation.
Yes, and we have with us in studio this morning our friends from the Belize Sugar Industries. We have McLachlan. He's the country manager for BSI. Good morning,
Good
Mark.
morning.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
April.
And he's joined by Modesto Ulloa. Okay, he's the agricultural consultant. And of course, we are discussing all things sugar this morning and what's been taking place within the industry over the past few weeks. I'll begin, first of all, for the benefit of our viewers who may not have been following this issue very closely, by asking you guys where we are at the moment.
Sure, Isani. Basically, we're about to start another crop. So we're hoping to start the third week of December. We're hoping it's going to be a very good crop. We've been putting a lot of investment into the mill to make sure that we can run the mill well and efficiently. And we're very much looking forward to another year where sugar prices are a little higher than they have been in the past. And we'll be able, as usual, to contribute to the Belizean economy in the way we do. We have an outstanding issue remaining, which has been in the media, and that's that one of the three cane farmer associations terminated the agreement they have with us, a cane purchase agreement. And over the last 2 years, we've been unable to agree on a new agreement or an extension to the old agreement. And that has left some conjecture about what's going to happen, remembering the illegal blockade of December last year. But, you know, we're hoping that common sense prevails. We're hoping that everybody can see the benefit of working together and collaborating so that we can move this industry forward.
When you say common sense, right? Just for the benefit of our viewers, what is the conflict? What does the conflict boil down to?
All right. Let me set it out super simply.
Yes.
You know, we've been here now as an ASR funded for BSI for the last 10 years, putting a lot of investment into this industry for its betterment, for its foundation, for a successful future. However, you know, that investment comes at a cost, and we've just finished the 5th consecutive year of business losses in Belize. The BSCFA, Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association leadership, is asking essentially for a transfer of $20 million from us to them through a change to the commercial agreement, which is completely untenable and unacceptable. And I think they understand that. So some people would say we talk past each other. Others would say that we've reached an impasse. I think, you know, when it comes to the industry, we have to recognize we perhaps have two different paths. Our pathway is to invest to grow the benefit of the industry for everybody, so to, you know, increase the pie so everybody gets a share of that. Theirs is very simply, and has been for the last 10 years, to exploit the mill and to try and get more value from the mill. So that's really where the impasse lies. I think that it's for me it's a difficult one, because, you know, we want every stick of cane that's out there, but this has to be willing buyer, willing seller at the end of the day.
Broad picture.
Yeah.
And if I can
Go
interrupt
ahead.
for a minute, at the root of the business, we're on the field side. We've also been trying to kind of introduce, you know, a transformation to bring a low input, extensive industry into a bit of a higher input, more cost effective system to deliver cane at lower cost for them also and for the industry.
When you look at it from a general perspective, with the exception of Santander that's doing its own private business with sugar, there is an inherent symbiosis between the Belize sugar industries and the sugarcane farmers in the north. But notwithstanding that relationship dynamic, it seems as if though there is always an issue. And I hate to say it that way, but from the perspective of those of us that have been covering sugar affairs, so to speak, it's one thing or another, and it's on an annual basis, right? That there is an issue that you guys need to address between the farmer and the miller. And I'm thinking, as an outsider, if one were to consider investing in the sugar industry, this constant back and forth, the bucking of heads, doesn't bode well for any form of outside investment into this industry?
You're absolutely right, Asani. And look, remember that there are 4 cane farmer associations. 3 of them we have long-term agreements, and that equates with our cane to about 50% of the cane. So we're talking 50% of the cane is looked after by the BSCFA and its leadership. And I couldn't agree with you more. We're not making any more strategic investments in Belize because we don't have the kind of environment conducive to making those investments, and we've made that very clear. We have made a lot of investments in the past. Remember, we had an agreement, a commercial agreement with BSCFA for the last 7 years, which worked, I think, for both parties. We've seen that through our investments, particularly, for example, in higher value direct consumption sugars. Over the last 4 years, the BSCFA farmers have received an additional $15 million above what they would have got for raw sugar as a result of those BSI investments. So what we're doing is just trying to build the pie because it's a value share agreement for both sides. I am extremely disappointed, very disappointed, that in 10 years we haven't come on at all in a industrial relations spirit, whereas we have with many other farmers. In fact, we have with quite a number of the BSCFA's farmers, but it's the leadership that I think continues to have this vision of what can we get from the mill rather than what can we build together as an industry.
But sugar politics is very oppressive when you look at it from that point of view, where if you as the miller are blaming the executives of the BSCFA, and the BSCFA on the other hand feels as if though you're trying to perhaps shortchange them from being able to realize certain certain gains, if I may, then the constant back and forth, I mean, stifles the industry more than it allows for there to be meaningful growth.
I'm sorry, but it does, and I'm not blaming anybody. Let's get that clear. I'm not blaming. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just stating facts of
Fair
where
enough.
we are as a business and where we need to go to as a business. The root cause of the difficulties is the very poor productivity in the cane farm and the very low efficiency in the cane farm. For example, sugarcane yields in Belize are about half those in neighboring countries and less than that in the world. Very hard for farmers to have a viable outcome from that situation. The harvesting and delivery, and Modesto can explain more about this, but the harvesting and delivery efficiencies, we have 2 sugar mills here, and as far as I understand, I believe that one delivers, harvests and delivers its cane for about half the price of the other one. So, you know, if you can imagine, say it's $30 Belize dollars to deliver, harvest and deliver cane in the north. If that were $15, that would be an additional $15 of earning for farmers. So, and if the cane yield was higher, there'd be more remuneration coming in for the same size plot, you see. So we've done a lot in the mill. It's a grade A mill. The efficiency in the mill is on a par with other industries. We've reduced lost time by 50%. We've increased our extraction rate of sugar. We've done all the things we had to do. We've built a port facility at Big Creek, which saved the farmers this last crop over $3 million, which kind of gets added to the cane price, you see. And that's why the cane price is 30% higher this year than it was last year. And next year's looking good as well. And that's partly because of sugar price increases, but it's also because of all our investments we've made in DC sugars and in the port. But all of that, you know, doesn't help in the end to make this an overall viable industry, because what we need is both the mill and the farm to be as cost effective and efficient as it can be, so that the overall industry is then competitive with other industries. And that's really what we're, you know, this debate doesn't seem to focus on that at all. It's always about what can the mill give, what can the mill give. No mill could subsidize that inefficiency. It would be impossible. And what we've made very clear is if we took the demands from the BSCFA leadership at face value, we would go bankrupt. And I don't think that's in the best interest of the farmers, the sugar mill certainly, but even I would go a lot further and point out to Belize itself. We're going to bring in $75 million US of hard currency here in sugar and molasses sales next year. This last year we pumped $40 million into the economy of the North through cane prices. And that's not including the benefits of looking after the livelihoods of 600 plus people in the mill. So, you know, this is a big deal for the country. We provide 15% of the electricity needs of Belize. When we have a blockade, we can't produce that electricity to sell to the grid. So there's lots of issues, but we're not here pointing fingers. What we want is a better future, and therefore we need a more efficient cane farm that's going to actually reward farmers more.
If I go back to your question, because you said we have two factories here and we have two parallel businesses.
Yeah.
And I think the technical aspects would be how do they differentiate? And I think that some of the things that we believe are transformation elements that we need to address is trying to move a little bit more efficiently. And the only way we can move a little bit more efficiently is by having higher pull or higher concentration of sugar in canes. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to increase our land base of varieties that have characteristically higher early sugar. Because when we start the season early, our sugar recovery is lower than during prime time, and then it drops off at the end. So the transformation of trying to bring in higher pull varieties is essential. Also, we have very inefficient use of equipment because Santander is blocking off their harvesting operations. So they have much higher use of their equipment than if you have to go, you know, and you have to make 10 stops in one day versus making one large stop and trying to block off farmers that have practices, varieties, and location in common.
But just to comment one thing there, when Modesto says increased varieties, well, what we're not talking about is increased overall cane supply or area of cane. We're talking about replanting in some areas to have a higher pole cane in the earlier part of the crop. What we want to see is more productivity on less land, because that, in the end, is how you improve
And we want
incomes.
more sugar per ton of cane.
Yeah.
In other words, remember, an early maturing variety, like Max says, is one that brings a higher sugar recovery in that first trimester of the season.
So we introduced 11 new varieties into the industry recently. Now, we're not saying any of those are super performers, that they're going to just transform the whole industry, but those things take about 10 years to develop. And we keep putting a lot of investment into that so that we have a better long-term future. As you know, we've worked very hard with the government to secure the CARICOM market for our sugars. We get a preference in the CARICOM market for brown sugars. We've gone from selling 2,000 tons 3-4 years ago to 20,000 tons possibly this year. So I mean, these are all great improvements. They're all. There's so much to be optimistic about. So much to be optimistic. It's just we need to ensure that, as we do with the other three associations, we have a good collective, collegiate, forward-thinking relationship with the BSEF.
So you're at loggerheads regarding this issue, and at some point there was a recommendation for there to be a mediator to step in to break the impasse, so to speak. But it would seem as if though you can't even agree on a mediator.
I mean, I don't know about that. I know there's a name around, and we've said yes. So, you know, we're just waiting to see what the other side says. It's been a week now, and I don't. We could have had that mediation by now. But I think, look, if we get back to the grassroots here, the issue is, I think a sensible, mutually agreed mediator would come and look at the facts on the table. Look at, you know, first thing you need is a mill that's functional, viable, and can mill that cane. Otherwise, you don't have an industry. So that's step one. Step two is what needs to happen in the cane farm in order to make that more viable as well. Now, many industries have been through this. Belize is not unique.
New to this.
I mean, Australia's been through this, Salvador, and a number of others who have had to take some of those hard decisions on how do we, Modesto said it best, transformation. It's transformation. There's a role for everybody in that transformed industry, but you've got to move from a very inefficient, low productivity to much higher efficient, higher productivity cane farm, because that in the end is how you build farmer viability. We want to help in that process.
In the respect to what the cane farmers want and what the mill can provide and what the mill does, what does the mill fund and why is it that the sugarcane farmers believe that they're being shortchanged?
Okay, that's a very good question, April. I mean, basically, we have a value share agreement that's been in place for decades. It's based on a 65-35 share of complicated name, net stripped value. It's basically the ex-mill value when the sugar is produced. Then after that, the shipping, the freight, the contribution to producing higher value sugars gets stripped off before the value is shared. So that's a normal way of operating in most sugar industries. That's the way it works, and that allows us to share with farmers the added value and the efficiencies, for example, of Big Creek Port or of direct consumption sugars. Because although farmers make a contribution, say, to the direct consumption sugars, they still earn more money at the end than they would have done for raw sugar. Over the last 4 years, that's been an average of $3.30 additional per ton of cane because of the direct consumption sugars. We've moved from a raw sugar factory to a largely food grade added value sugar factory. We did that because BSI, unlike say Mexico and the US, we're exposed largely to the global market. And that means that when the prices in the global markets are traded commodity sugar, when the prices are high, as they're reasonably high at the moment, that's good. People earn a decent wage, or as I said, the cane farmers are getting a 30% pay rise this year from last year. But if the prices are low, we need to protect ourselves by making higher value sugars that give us a greater margin.
And stability.
And stability, and that's why we did it. And then the value of that is then shared with the farmers. Now, BSCFA are arguing, do away with all the deductions, just give us 60% of the gross revenue. Now that doesn't work, because that means we make all the investment, we pay the additional cost to transfer that sugar into food grade, and they get 60% of the benefit without.
What is their rationale for wanting to demand the 60%?
They haven't been able to provide a rationale to us, and that's one of the problems. We've been asking for the economic rationale behind that massive change from what's happened in the last 50 years to today, and they simply have that. They come up with figures which don't really equate to, in the media, not to us, which don't really equate to anything that we can make sense of.
Is there a collective thought perhaps that they're seeing all of this investment being made, all of this work being done, and they say, hey, these people have money, so maybe we're able to squeeze more out of it?
Can I say something about that?
Yes, please.
Okay. We said we have 5,200 farmers, okay? But 5,200 farmers are independent entities. They work independently on their farm for themselves. So what one farmer decides in terms of what he wants to invest and how he wants to run his farm really doesn't affect the other 5,199 farmers, okay? Whereas the factory has no choice. In other words, the factory has to provide services to all 5,200 farmers. So in other words, we have to run that ship full steam ahead, because if we don't run full steam ahead, if we don't do proper repairs and proper investments, then everybody loses. See? And that's a very important angle, that we need to look at.
But to answer your question with a fact, I mean, we have $54 million of long-term debt as a result of a lot of the investments we've made. As you know, through the changes in interest rates recently, LIBOR has increased greatly. That's a much greater drain on the factory than it has been in the past. I'm happy with that investment. Those are the right things to do. No sugar industry can sit still and not move. That's fatal in the sugar industry. So we're looking at how we can increase the pie for everybody, which is what we've been doing, to give ourselves a better foundation for the future. But we have a lot of debt. We have to service that debt. And but I take your point completely. For looking from the outside, somebody might say, well, hang on, look at these guys pouring money in here. That they must be making a fortune. Now, I'll give you one example of how this negotiation doesn't progress. With the BSCFA are asking for $5 per ton of cane for bagasse. Now, this was a whole cause of problem 7 years ago that you
Who owns the bagasse?
Who owns the bagasse? And all that. We buy the cane, then we have to pay separately for the bagasse. But we agreed to do that with the quantum for bagasse. But it had to be on a reasonable term, because the bagasse has no value in the tariff structure on which we get paid for electricity. So this is off our bottom line, you see. Now coming back saying we want an extra $5 a ton. That's $5 million they want for bagasse. So we've shared the Belcogen financial statements and the balance sheets and the PPA with the BSEFA that proves that Belcogen is not making any profit. Yet, even despite that, asking for $5, I mean, it's not economically logical. However, I'm very keen that this whole conversation shouldn't be about an impasse with one association compared to 3 others. I'm convinced if people come to the table with a common sense approach, as I've said, with an eye on what's credible and what isn't credible, there's no reason why we can't have a long-term agreement in place before the crop starts. We always have done in the past.
Here's the thing, Mark, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. These previous issues that resulted in standoffs between the miller and the farmer, at the time, several years ago, BSCFA was the only game in town where an association was concerned. The previous administration saw to it that there is somewhat of a splintering that created the other association so that you don't have this issue with only one association of farmers. But it would seem that notwithstanding that so-called splintering, BSCFA still commands the majority of the fields and the membership and what have you. So you're still very much stuck with them. If you go the route of the other 50%, in other words, the other associations that have branched off, it's only half of what you can realize outside of BSCFA.
Correct, so that's a fact. I mean, you talk about splintering. This wasn't really splintering. This was the government at the time adhered to a constitutional advisory ruling, which said that it's unconstitutional to force everyone to be a member of one association. In fact, it's unconstitutional to prevent anyone contracting with each other, inside or outside an association. I think, one of the issues here that we have to recognize is this is a private sector business. Why are some of the other industries in the Caribbean not doing so well? In fact, going downhill rapidly because they don't have private sector investment coming into those businesses. And we've seen the impact of that across the region. Here we have that. We came in at a time where the industry was really going under, and it's now in a reasonably good place, but it still requires, our running costs are $60 million a year. We've invested a huge amount of money, $150 million here to stabilize this business. And so all of these are facts. And I think, when it comes to the rights of people to contract, I think we really have to look at that quite carefully because, anybody in this country as a private sector individual can contract with each other. Why shouldn't they be able to? So the changes in law were not splintering, that they were actually affecting a constitutional ruling that had happened some 9 years earlier. And just put that into effect, that's all.
From an outsider just looking at the entire situation, it just seems that it's a matter of distrust between one company and another. And the bottom line is that they're being advised as well. They have their own advising committee, and they're also seeing productivity of sugar industries in other countries that compete with Belize. And they're saying, hey, they're getting more money, why can't we? So let's get into that. How does Belize compete on the larger scale when it comes to sugar?
Belize is widely exposed to the global market for selling its sugar. Now, the sugar price, the amount revenue you can earn for sugar has a direct relationship to the amount of money that gets paid for sugar cane, obviously. I think it's been very disingenuous, actually, of BSEFA leadership to point to countries like Mexico and Guatemala. And I'll tell you why. Because sugar production in Mexico is geared to the local market. They produce about 6 million tons of sugar. 4 million goes to the domestic market, 124 million consumers. 2 million then gets exported to the United States. In both markets, they're looking at, say, 32 cents a pound or more for the sale of that sugar. We're exposed to a global market at 18 cents. So
lower.
It has been down at 9 cents. So you can't compare apples and oranges, only if you're trying to be disingenuous, because believe me, the folk who are saying that know very well that is the situation, but they're explaining to their farmers, look what you could get in Mexico. Listen, if we could get 32 cents a pound, we'd pay $100 for a ton of cane happily, but we just don't have that resource. So April, you're talking about advisors to the industry. Well, I'm not sure how effective that advice is at the moment, because, as I've said, a lot of what's on the table at the moment is simply unattainable. I think it's been recognized as unattainable by others.
So then solutions.
Well,
where do we go?
Well,
Because
transformation is one solution. In other words, part of, especially in the harvesting, which would be the loading and the transportation element, trying to identify, because we've been supportive of the variety development program, even though variety development is kind of like lottery, it's one in a million. It's not like we can just make new varieties.
Yeah.
But, if we can increase the concentration of sugar in the cane that's coming in, we make more sugar, and the cane is worth more money.
Yeah.
So
another key element is there's no agro credit in this country. Proper credit, meaning that it's tasked over a period of time where a farmer can repay it at a reasonable interest rate. Anyone borrowing money here at 12% interest over 12 months, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to make ends meet. We're trying at the moment to trial blockchain technology-based agro credit system, linking the commercial banking structure to the farm using GIS systems that demonstrate how much cane is in the land. So reducing the risk to the lender, also putting that resource through service provision rather than direct cash. So that at the end of the day, that the payback is on the improvement in cane, the improvement in productivity. And then we can prove that all that's happening through the GIS system as it goes along, and then the farmer ends up being able to repay with something left over.
And also going back to what Max said initially, in other words, if we can get out of that, typical marketplace and get into the niche market with some of these direct consumption sugars that are going to fetch a more stable price.
Yeah.
And so it's a struggle in all areas.
Would you then believe that they would be open? Because sugar farming is a very traditional way of life, especially in the north, right? How do you suggest moving forward in a way where they would be open to trying a different agricultural technique in order to produce better sugar? Is what you say?
I mean, you produced, Modesto, a study, yeah?
We have the IDB funded study that was for the transformation of Belize, and that was kind of a pathway, because ever since I've been coming here because ASR and BSI have been trying to attract funding, because Belize, being a country in development, is a potential place where people want to invest to see if we can come into a better atmosphere.
Yeah.
So we've worked on a lot of very long-term projects, but the most recent one was a Green Climate Fund, correct? And the Green Climate Fund actually has some prerequisites, because if they're going to give you money towards green climate, they're not going to really give you money to go back to traditional farming practices. Okay,
It has to be progressive.
It has to be
well, it
progressive.
has to
Climate-
be,
climate resilient.
carbon sequestration,
Right,
moisture, climate resilient. In other words, growing varieties that are disease resistant, and so forth. So I think that it's a long-term business. Going back to what you said about the agreement, sugar cane is not like a corn crop that you plant, you grow for 120 days, and if you want to get out of it, you get out of it. In other words, sugar cane, especially in Belize, some of those cane fields out there might be 15, 20 years old.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's a very long-term business, both for the processor and for the farmer.
Modesto, living up to his name, is being a bit modest here. He co-authored with other specialists under a company called AgriCane to produce really the Bible. I mean, this is a serious look at all different aspects of the industry and how it could be moved. The one I like best is the transformation strategy, which takes you from here to there, but in different pathways. So some people might continue as they are. There's room for everyone in this industry. Some might move more to service provision instead of farming. They might start up SMEs looking at providing service to farmers. Others might go the whole hog, become cooperatives with a group of others, so you get the benefits of scale in the industry. Others might become much bigger farmers, much more effective farmers. So there are all different pathways to take the industry through. And as I said before, Belize is not unique. Many industries have had to go through this system,
Transformation.
because at the end of the day, a national sugar industry is only as competitive as the costs of its production.
The task that was
And that's
given
cane
for
and factory.
the task that was given for the report, in that package, it had very important elements. Of course, an environmental element, because we're targeting to get fund to protect the environment. It had a social element, like Max says, because if you're tampering with cultural practices,
Right.
you're also tampering with potential impacts in the social fabric.
Yeah.
So it's a very comprehensive study. We really enjoyed doing it, and I think it's got some good stuff in there. And definitely everybody has to give something, and everybody has to be willing.
Right.
You know, one of the biggest problems, I'm a Cuban by birth, so I know the Caribbean culture well, and it's embedded in here. And we tend to have wax in our ears sometimes. So, you know, we have our own ways of doing things.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to work out. You know, I have great faith. I love Belize.
Perhaps
you know.
that is a something to put on the consultation table where we move forward in new traditional
April, it's on the
ways.
table. It's been there for 12 months. Each of the associations have a copy of that. What we'd like actually is to 20 time goes by so
Yes,
fast.
yes.
2013, 14, we could see the end of EU preferences coming. We knew we had to fix this industry up a bit. So we started a conversation about a strategic development plan that would set out the roles and responsibilities of each of the different sectors and players, including government, including, you know, the farmers, including the mill, financial institutions, everything. Unfortunately, at that time, that's when the only association at the time refused to collaborate on that because they wanted more money for bagasse. And
Right.
that's where this whole thing started all these years ago. We went ahead, we wrote that white paper, and we're continually looking at it to update it. And when you look at all the things that were in there, investment in the factory to improve its efficiency, tick. New logistics systems, Big Creek Port, tick. Improved productivity and efficiency in the cane farm, cross. And, you know, I think what we need to do is to go back there. We need to go to a place where everyone has a shared vision for the future and not frightened about it. You know, there's no reason for that. What we're looking at is mutual improvement across the board. And if we can get to that point, and if everyone can get behind that, instead of constantly, to your point, Asani, you're having butting heads, you called it. Great analogy. You know, it really is. We don't need butting heads. We certainly don't need illegal blockades of the mill. And we also don't need unhelpful rhetoric, such as that I heard last week from one of the BSCFA leaders saying, well, it was peaceful last time, but who knows this time. There's no room for that in this industry or this country, I would argue. And I think we all need to be far more sensible and level-headed than that. So we're hoping that in the next, you know, 4 weeks, we've still got 4 or 5 weeks, that we can, you know, have a serious discussion about where we go next. On the bigger picture, not just about whether or not BSCFA and BSI can get along. This is about where
Right.
this goes as a national industry for the benefit of Belize as a country.
Well, we are completely out of time, but we hope that you all can come to a solution sooner rather than later. Final question for me. Do you believe that the crop season will start on
Yes,
time?
I do, and one of the main reasons, just very briefly, is because the cane price for next year is looking pretty strong. So
Okay.
it would be
So we have to.
it would be foolish not to have a crop.
Thank you, McLachlan, Modesto Ulua. Thank you so much for coming in this morning, and we hope that we get some new updates very, very soon.
Thank you for sharing the time with us. We
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Yes. for having me on.
And with that, we're going to take our next break, and we'll be back with more OIE, so stay tuned.